recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I have listened both in here and in my office today, your testimony before this committee. And I think the frustration that I have as the cleanup crew at the very end of this committee is that you seem to answer very eloquently all the questions that the other side of the aisle pose, but when posed with questions, specific questions about the border on this side of the aisle, you seem to dance and dodge, as Ms. Hageman talked about, the true answers, that you talk about, you filibuster, if you will, what people really are asking. And these aren't questions that are hatched out of some think tank. These are questions that our citizens have because they see what's going on. You know, what's remarkable to me since day one of this administration, you've terminated construction of the border wall. You restricted the ability of immigration officers to deport aliens who violate U.S. law. You terminated the MPP, the Remain in Mexico policy, despite people on the ground talking about how successful that it was. You abused parole authority to release illegal aliens en masse into the United States and creating categorical parole programs in violation of the ANA's case-by-case basis. You refuse to follow federal law requiring aliens to be detained during the pendency of their asylum proceedings. You terminated asylum cooperative agreements with Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. You refuse to comply with the provisions of the INA that require the detention of asylum seekers. You cut out immigration judges, ICE attorneys, and the process of the asylum system itself. You support sanctuary city policies by giving them grants. You implemented, until it was enjoined, a 100-day moratorium on alien removals. You have misused, as has been talked about here, the CBP One app that has institutionalized mass parole and release policies in this country. It's been described as a shell game, pretty fairly stated, that you otherwise shift things around, you create definitions within your department that you think that are appropriate, you create law, which isn't your function, and then you come before Congress and you say that everything is fine. Well, we've been to Yuma, Arizona, sir, and we've seen the devastation down there. We've talked to people. 70 sheriffs just last year said that there is no border at all. We simply have no border left in Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, and Texas. That's the National Sheriff's Association. You've been held to account by courts. Texas v. Biden, DHS's position, quote, position that the crisis at the border is not largely of their own making because of their more lenient detention policies is divorced from reality and belied by the evidence. Florida versus the United States in the Northern District of Florida, quote, the Biden administration have effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand and little more than a speed bump for aliens flooding into the country by prioritizing alternatives for detention over actual detention and by releasing more than 1 million aliens into the country. Real quick, let's play a video.
Crisis on the border that just keeps getting worse. These are live pictures of Del Rio, Texas, a town that borders Mexico, where almost 9,000 migrants are currently camping out.
Government data showing there were more than 220,000 encounters with migrants along the border last month, the highest number in 22 years.
Law enforcement leaders from federal, state, and local agencies announced Tuesday an unprecedented 2-month-long fentanyl enforcement surge along the southwest border that resulted in the seizure of more than 4,700 pounds of fentanyl.
Fentanyl being pushed through the desert around El Paso is up more than 355% compared to last year.
For the first time, fentanyl is being smuggled between the ports of entry.
There have been more than 200 people on the FBI terror watch.
Crisis on the border that just keeps getting worse.
So the numbers don't lie. 5.6 million illegal immigration or illegal alien encounters, 1.5 million known gotaways, more than 2.2 million illegal aliens into this country, meaning that 3.6 million illegal aliens are in this country since the start of your tenure. That's astronomical. 160 countries. The people on the terror watch list that we know about, 140 just this year. It's at an all-time high. So look, this doesn't lie. These are the stats, Mr. Secretary. And so you come up here and you blame the former president, and you say that they've gutted the immigration system. You blame Congress for not acting. But you know what? These numbers weren't here for Obama. They weren't here for Trump. But they seem to be here for you. So you like to blame other people for your failures in not doing your job. And quite frankly, the American people want to know, how qualified are you to even carry out your mission? Because everybody else seems to indicate, from local law enforcement to sheriffs to ranchers to farmers to citizens on the border, when I ask them, is the border more secure? They say resoundingly no. And that's on your watch, sir. With that, I yield.
Senator Paul.
I think it's easy to look around the world and find places where the U.S. taxpayer can be asked to send money to fix the world's problems, but there is an important question we might want to ask before we start sending $100 billion more. Where are you going to get it? You know, we don't have any money. Every bit of our tax revenue goes to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and food stamps. Those four programs consume all of our tax revenue. Everything else is borrowed. In fact, the entire discretionary budget right now is being borrowed. We borrowed $1 trillion in the last 3 months. Interest rates have doubled. Interest payments have doubled. So you can have all this goodwill and try to fix the world's problems, but you're ignoring the rot and ruin you're creating in your own country. Mr. O'Brien, in Russia's weakened state, it's tempting to forget that they're a nuclear power. But I think our foreign policy decisions need to take into account the dangers of war escalating in Ukraine. As Harvard's Graham Allison points out, if Putin is forced to choose between humiliating defeat on the one hand and escalating the level of destruction, there's every reason to believe he chooses the latter. There's a great deal of evidence that the war in Ukraine has come to a stalemate. Even Ukraine's commander-in-chief of the armed services has admitted as much. In Graham Allison's view, the Ukraine war has escalated far enough to see how bad things would become if we end up in a world where nuclear weapons are used. Allison believes that where we are now, both for Putin's Russia and for the Biden-led U.S. and the Western alliance, it's time to search for an off-ramp for all of the parties. What is being done at the State Department to search for an off-ramp?
Thank you, Senator. A few points. I mean, I can speak to the foreign policy implications. My belief is if we don't stand with Ukraine now, we'll be spending much more on defense in the future. And much of this supplemental goes to reinvest in the United States. So far from rot and ruin, we're actually shoring up the foundations in our energy sector, as Assistant Secretary Pyatt.
So your argument is that war and funding war around the world is good for our armaments industry?
I'm saying this supplemental is good for our economy.
For the armaments industry. So really it's a justification of war. To me, that's sort of reprehensible. The idea that, and this is coming from my side as well, oh, glory be, the war is really not that bad. Broken windows are not that bad because we pay people to fix them. Broken countries are not so bad because, hey, look, the armaments industry is going to get billions of dollars out of this. Yeah. I think that's a terrible argument. I wish y'all would say maybe there's go back to your freedom argument or something. But the idea that you're going to enrich the armaments manufacturers, I think is reprehensible.
Well, Senator, I'm not making the argument war is good. I'm making the argument in this case war is necessary.
And that we can make a little profit on the side. It's not so bad since the armaments guys will make a lot of profit on this, right?
No, Senator, I think you're proposing a kind of false choice that I either have to say that or say nothing. What I'm saying is that our economy rests on a foundation of innovation, and in this supplemental, we're investing in our energy sector, as you just heard.
The money's borrowed. We're borrowing the money. We don't have it. We don't have a pot of money. So what you're arguing is, in essence, that we borrow the money from China, we send it to Ukraine, Ukraine sends it back to buy arms from us, and that's a win-win. How do we win when we're borrowing money to pay people? See, this is this sort of false sort of argument that, oh, well, look, we'll create 5 jobs for every dollar we spend, but we're borrowing the money. It doesn't make any sense. It's coming from somewhere where it would be in a productive use to where it's into the use of basically fomenting a war and continuing a war.
No, that's not the choice in front of us, Senator, and I'm sorry that you feel that that's the way you want to frame it. The choice in front of us is, do we invest in the capacities that allow this war to be won? Those include capacities in energy, in defense, in IT.
In the original question, let's get away from funding the armaments people. I'm not for that. But the original question is, what are you doing to develop an off-ramp? When I listen to your presentations, it sounds like the Department of War. I don't hear the Department of Diplomacy in front of me. Where are the diplomats? Is anybody talking about negotiation? Yeah. Do you really believe that that Ukraine's going to push Russia out of Ukraine. They're going to push them out of Crimea, push them out of the east, and that Zelensky's position, we will not negotiate till they're gone from Ukraine, is viable, and that there's not going to have to be some negotiation beforehand. If you believe that, though, the meat grinder continues, and Ukraine will be an utter destruction, and tens of thousands of more people will die if there is no negotiation. You would think that as a superpower, we would be involved somewhat with encouraging negotiation, but I've heard nothing from you and nothing from anyone in your administration, frankly, that talks about negotiating.
So, well, Senator, then I hope you would, sit down and talk with me about what we're doing in this regard. Here, I'll give you a little sense of it. All wars end with a negotiation. We've made clear we'll do that with Ukraine, not over Ukraine's head. It takes two parties to negotiate the end of a war. President Putin is not serious about negotiating the end of the war. He has said he wants to wait and see what happens in November 24. So we're preparing for that eventuality so we can have a negotiation that will actually stick, as opposed to the track record of broken agreements that President Putin has made with a whole range of his neighbors up until now. So that's successful diplomacy, not mere diplomacy.
There are actually some who say we're back to about where we started as far as negotiating, and tens of thousands of people have died on both sides, and we haven't been successful. But I still hear only war, and I don't hear diplomacy.
No, but I think what we're looking at is successful diplomacy. I just spent last weekend with 66 countries talking about the basis of a successful peace in Ukraine. Russia didn't show up. That, again, is the problem. You don't have a willing partner on the other side. So simply saying that there must be talks is, you're asking for a monologue, not diplomacy.
Senator Merkley.
Secretary O'Brien.
No, Senator.
Senator Merkley.
Secretary O'Brien.
Chọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh. Em nghe tình yêu thức dậy êm đềm. Nhớ từng nụ cười ánh mắt, nhớ lời ngọt ngào âu yếm, tóc em thơm giấc ngủ dịu. Biết giờ này anh có nhớ em không? Có nghe tình yêu thức dậy trong lòng. Đêm từng màu thời gian đến, bóng hình người mình yêu mến. Ôi nhớ gì hơn nhớ người yêu. Rất chân thành, ước nguyện trọn đời yêu anh, chớ đừng giận hơn em nhé. Anh ơi, đừng bao giờ nói chia lìa, sẽ làm tội nghiệp em lắm. Đã thương nhau chớ phụ tình nhau. Thức trọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh. Sương rơi lạnh câm cạnh vật im lìm. Ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách. Hai đứa mình thức trắng đêm nay. chân thành, ước nguyện trọn đời yêu anh, chớ đừng giận hơn em nhé. Anh ơi, đừng bao giờ nói chia lìa, sẽ làm tội nghiệp em lắm. Đã thương nhau chớ phụ tình nhau, thức trọn đêm nay để nhớ thương anh. Sương rơi lạnh câm cảnh vật im lìm, ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách, hai đứa mình thức trắng đêm nay. Ước gì mình đừng ngăn cách, ước gì nhà mình chung vách, hai đứa mình thức trắng